Hi, this is Julia Walker with Grey Duck Forge, and today I'm going to do a little review video on Coria and how they work, what they are, and whatnot. So whether you're learning this for the first time, are apprenticing and are bored and want to learn stuff, or are studying for AFA certification, hopefully this gives you something to think about in regards to Coria and how they work. In a nutshell, Coria grow the hoof structures. The end. But we'll get into it a little bit more. So that hoof material is grown by live tissue, which is what we refer to as the Coria. And they're those bloody bits inside the hoof, usually involving a region of sort of that fleshy material that either grows on a bone or whatever, that's kind of covered with those little red fleshy stalactites that we call papilla. So every main visible structure has a corium that corresponds to it. It's 1-to-1. Hopefully should be pretty easy to remember as long as you know where everything is growing from. And then I put some stuff there at the bottom for like naming conventions because, depending on where you're looking, different textbooks sometimes throw around a lot of different terms to describe different things. Or different terms to describe the same thing, I should say. So, perioplic ring, perioplic coria, sensitive, dermal, live, there's a lot of words that get thrown around to kind of say a lot of the same thing. So dermal and epidermal are kind of the main thing that's hard to keep apart, but epidermal, external, that's kind of the main thing. I just look for those E's, and I just remember epidermal, external. So then dermal obviously can't be external, so it's got to be internal. So that's the main thing. But sensitive, insensitive, external, corium, horny, live, there's a lot of words that get thrown around. But if you need to know kind of the main scientific terms are sort of the dermal and epidermal words. So dermal, corium, theme of the day. So jumping into the epidermal structures or external structures of the hoof. So your 5 main structures: your wall, your sole, your frog, your white line, and your periopal. As a farrier, you gotta be able to work with all of those. Any of those things can have different problems. And so a lot of horse owners don't know that the white line or the periopal exist. They don't know that the bars exist. And they certainly, if you said the heel buttress, they'd look at you like you had 6 heads. So, gotta know all sorts of things, but the 5 main ones are sort of your wall, your sole, your frog, your white line, and your periopal. And then those 5 all have a corium that they correspond to. But for certification type stuff, being able to name kind of everything that's on this diagram is probably smart, and the right side is mostly for reference for shaping shoes. Like toe quarter is probably not super important for certification, but helpful for referring to different parts of the hoof, especially when you're apprenticing and working with other people. But I think being able to go through and label this yourself can be really helpful. So you can even take a screenshot and then copy it and take it into your notes app and draw on it on your phone if you want, just to be able to make sure that you can fill this out at a moment's notice. So real quick, then I can give you the answers, so I'll abbreviate a little bit. But the first one's your white line, then here you got your hoof wall, there you got your sole, then your frog, and here, this fun little structure here are your bars. This one's pointing into this kind of region in here, your seat of corns. This is pointing to this region, which there's a lot of ways that you can refer to it. Your collateral grooves, your commissures, so we'll just write commissures. And I'm probably spelling that wrong, but who cares? You know what I'm saying. Next up, you've got the tip of your heel there, and so that's your heel buttress. Next, we're pointing to this groove here, so we'll call it your central sulcus of the frog. And then back here, because it's not really part of the hoof per se, but you know, it's pointing to like this, you know, back bit here. So that's going to be your heel buttress, or not heel buttress, I'm sorry, heel bulbs. But it could also potentially, depending on if you're doing like a multiple choice and periopal is still available, it might be pointing to the periopal. So, but we'll talk about this as your bulbs, heel bulbs. Oh goodness, my pen is not, well, you can read it. You can totally read it, and I said it 6 times, so you know what I'm talking about. Okay. Moving on to the internal structures with a nice gory photograph of some bloody nastiness from a dissection. So we're talking the main Coria, the Coria that are ever really discussed, since we're referring to different kind of regions of papilla-coated bloody bits on the outside of other things. So sort of your main easy ones, sole, frog, and periopal, they all have like the name of the thing next to the word corium, so easy enough to match which one grows which. The other two are the two that people sometimes get stuck on. So the hoof wall grows from the coronary band, right? It doesn't grow like from the center out. It grows from your coronary band down. So remembering that the coronary band area is where your hoof wall grows from is how you can connect this coronary band to your hoof wall. That leaves one more. So even by process of elimination, then it's like, okay, coronary band grows off of the hoof wall, or hoof wall grows off the coronary band, I should say. So boom, the rest of them are just like Pam holding 2 pictures and saying they're the same picture. For solar corium, frog corium, and perioplic corium, like they correspond word to word, one to one. Or if you want to make sure that you always get it right, the terminal papilla of the sensitive lamina on this diagram here are the little papilla, the little stalactites right along that peripheral edge of the coffin bone at the bottom. And that is sort of the exact shape of your undistorted white line on a hoof. So the last word here, lamina, you've got that L there, white line, L, so lamina, line, you know, the white line is an extension kind of those lamina as they grow down. So lamina, line, that's basically like a one-to-one word thing. There's just a lot of words before you get to lamina, so ignore all the other words. Lamina, line, boom, memorized, easy peasy. There are plenty of other important internal structures, like the papilla, the lamina, the veins, the arteries, the nerves, the bones, the cushions, the ligaments, tendons, and there's more. But bursa, even. There's a navicular bursa in there, but there's even more than that. So, in terms of internal structures, there's more that we can get into in kind of this hoof structures series, but for now, Coria-wise, those are the 5. Cool. These are pictures from Butler's book. I like them because like one picture slots into the next. So you've got a few different ways to kind of visualize the Coria, because you can't always just do a dissection every day to study, right? I mean, unless you work at a vet clinic and nobody cares how many hooves you dissect off of their beloved animals and pets, you probably can't dissect a hoof every day to study. So this also helps visualize like different angles, different ways that you see a hoof, like imagining the Coria inside with your farrier x-ray vision. So one thing that I think this diagram is helpful for is to show you that perioplic corium is up above the coronary corium. So thinking about a hoof wall, right, the periopal is up above the rest of the hoof wall. So when you see a diagram and they're saying which Coria is this, and they're pointing to the one up top and then the one slightly underneath it, and they're both in that coronary region, and we're talking Coria specifically, just remember that the periopal is up above the coronary band. And that'll bring you pretty far, potentially in your exam as well. Another view of it, and you can kind of see the dots representing those terminal papilla of the sensitive lamina, and they're going all the way around that peripheral edge of the coffin bone. And this, if you're playing connect the dots here, my pen will work. This line, same as the white line. So lamina, line, where does the hoof wall grow from? The coronary band area. Otherwise, then frog, sole, perioplic, corium, periopal. Lovely. it takes like 2 brain cells to know this, and you've got them, so great job. Cool, moving on. Briefly, how the Coria work. Not a very scientific explanation, but the Coria are the sites where keratinization or keratinization, however you want to say it, who knows how to say that, honestly, it's a huge word, but the Coria are the sites where keratinization or hoof formation takes place. So the cells of the Coria are taking in nutrition from the blood, and they're converting it into keratin by excreting it. So the cells are basically like pooping out these keratin filaments as like a waste product based off of the nutrition that they're taking in from the blood. So then those filaments, as they're getting excreted from the cells, are excreted in a certain way that the cell's DNA says is how they should excrete it. And so how they are excreting those keratin filaments forces them to get turned into these cool like helixes and all these like interesting small shapes that wind into bigger shapes, that wind into even bigger conglomerate matrices of shapes, and it just keeps scaling up, and it's insanely cool, and people have looked at it in microscopes, and it's really interesting. So look up keratinization or keratinization if you want. There's some kind of interesting diagrams to make your head spin, but it's those cool formations that build these different structures, and we all know that the frog has a slightly different vibe to it than the hoof wall, and even different layers of the hoof wall have different vibes, and that's all coming out of the DNA of these cells in the Coria that are growing all these different structures. So it's just kind of a cool plan, and as long as like nothing weird happens to the hoof, everything goes amazingly. And then you do a giant hoof wall resection and everything goes to absolute crap. So, but when it's all started off right, everything is vibing pretty well with the Coria. Like, they do a good job as long as nothing weird happens to them. They don't get disrupted. So the Coria need to be connected to the circulatory system to work properly. So that's why there's blood involved. So if you're trimming down and you hit something bloody, like, congrats, you either hit something that's part of the circulatory system or you hit a Coria, or a corium. So that's some fun science. Now, don't ever do that fun science again, right? But the tissues that the Coria form are dead, so the blood stops at the Coria, which is why it's kind of cool how those diagrams from before, like, just like this thing with blood in it slots into that thing that doesn't have blood in it, and it's kind of a cool line of demarcation to study the hoof, especially because during a dissection, like, that's how we dissect the hoof, which is why we even think about, like, what Coria are. It's a visible structure, but only after you peel the hoof wall off a hoof. Just kind of an interesting thing. So, to summarize, Coria, or the singular version of that is the word corium, Latin, yay, are the blood-connected tissues that grow the parts of the hoof that we can see on the outside. And the regions are simplified into words that directly correspond to the structures that they grow. So it's like a one-to-one correspondence. Frog corium grows the frog. Where's the hoof wall grow? Coronary band area. So coronary corium grows the hoof wall. So if you can remember where every structure starts on those corium, and you picture that dissected hoof in your mind, like, where does every external structure grow off of, then you can reverse engineer which corium grows that structure. And it should be impossible for you to get it wrong if you can just imagine where everything is growing from. And you could picture that dissected hoof in your mind. So it's just 5 structures each, like 5 external structures, 5 internal structures, and yeah. And that's it. Easy, simple, effective. So, and that's pretty much everything that I think a beginner or a very educated beginner needs to know about Coria. So hopefully that helps you in your studying for the exam. I'm going to try and make this a part of a series just to make review videos for the exam. Try and get specific so that it's harder for you to forget. The more specific you get, the harder it is to forget the big stuff. So cool. Thanks for joining me today. Good luck to you in your endeavors, and hopefully I'll see you in another video.